Welcome Mr. Zahrt to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for coming out with all this bad weather. I'm real happy to see all of you here. There's Dwayne. Before I start, a kit house you might think is something that's cheap, kind of like a prefab or something like that, but it was kind of top of the line house. They were built with the best material. They were all the lumber in the houses was all pre-cut. The notches and stuff for the rafters and all of that is all cut, so all you had to do is just throw it together. But if somebody says I live in a kit house, they've got a good house. And I originally started off, I was going to make a survey of the whole county. And I talked to Kathy to get something set up, and started digging into it and found out there's so many houses in Winnemac that I couldn't do the county. You not only have a kit house, but you have a kit barn.
I don't have one.
You don't think so? I think you do. I'm going to prove it.
I can show you the old house that they tore down. Not yet.
Oh, well, okay. Anyway, here we go. What is a kit house? A kit is a kind of building or house that is assembled on site, but where the parts of the structure have been pre-cut at a factory and they've been delivered by railroads in packages. In addition to framing lumber, we have a picture of the they had door frames, windows, leaded glass windows. Here's one right here that came out of it. And you had options to put this kind of a window in your house if you wanted to. And there's a bunch of houses around town that have leaded windows in them, and that's one of the keys for identifying a kit house. Another thing, this is a piece of the lumber that's pre-cut. It's a door frame. I'll get into that in a little while. But the Sears catalog of homes came complete with all the necessary hardware: nails, screws, shellac, hinges, paint, downspouts, staircases, mantelpieces, blueprints, and a 75-page book telling you how to put it together, and even a doorbell. Sears had 447 different houses. Sears encouraged potential buyers to customize their designs with the aid of a Sears architectural department. They could flip the image of a house. If you wanted your door on the other side, they could flip it. They could put an extra door in, or they could extend a room a couple feet, and they bent over backwards to satisfy their customers. These mail-order houses were more accessible to the middle class than traditional stick-built homes, and homeowners often acted as their own builders, putting the home up in stages as they could afford to do so. The kit was popular from about 1900 to 1950. The most known kit home companies were Sears Roebuck, Aladdin Homes, Lewis Homes, Liberty Homes, Montgomery Ward, Sterling Homes, International Mill and Timber, Harris Brothers, Gordon Van Tyne, Bennett Homes, Pacific Homes, just to name a few. And Frank Lloyd Wright even got involved with kit homes. He made a home called a Usonian, which was a lower quality than what he would normally build. Back then, he built mansions and worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he built the Usonian house so more people could afford it, and they were more successful than their competitors. He didn't last very long in that business. Most of these companies were located in the Midwest, although there were a few on the West Coast, like Pacific Homes in Los Angeles, and Ready Built Homes in Portland, Oregon. Bossert Ready Built Homes by Louis Bossert and Sons from Brooklyn, New York, and Paragon Ready Cut Homes from Mineola, New York. So they were all over. Aladdin Homes, not Sears, offered the first true kit homes. The pre-cut and fitted materials shrunk construction time by up to 40%. This in turn lowered manufacturing and homeowners' costs. It also, not only did it shrink the cost, but the quality was much better than even a good carpenter. Because back then they would saw a lot of the boards when they made a stick-built house, and all of the lumber for these houses was cut with a regular circular saw. It had these big tubes running in the ceiling with bands coming down to the saws, and they ran their saws that way. And can we back up just a second? Let's go to that one with the railroad car. That's how they loaded them. This picture here is from Pacific Ready Cut Homes, which is out on the left coast. Nobody picked that up. I did. Oh, okay, good. You're listening. It's interesting to note that Sears packed the materials on rail cars so they could be unloaded from the rail car in the order of construction. So they'd come in on a siding and you take the piece off, put it on the ground, take another piece, and pretty soon you had a house. Thousands, possibly as many as 500,000 kit houses were sold in the United States, Canada, England, and other countries. The common bungalow was the most popular model of homes sold because they were cheap to build, small and simple in design, and functional for first-time buyers. Bungalows came in a wide variety of types and styles that included arts and crafts, Spanish, colonial, and English Tudor. So far, we only have one house documented as a Gordon Van Tyne, but I suspect there's another 5 or 6. And Charlie McKinley has to be credited for getting me started on my quest to study kit homes. We went on a Kiwanis Inner Club, and somehow he mentioned that his house was a kit house, and my ears perked up, and there we go. So anyway, this house, Mrs. John Ho, Herbie Ho's mother, altered the plan. She didn't take it out of the book. She altered it just so it could be just the way she wanted it. And Charlie showed me the purchase order, the piece of paper showing that he paid for the house. And it was dated June 2 of 1916, and Gordon Van Tyne in Iowa, out on the river, began marketing the homes in 1916. So this could have been one of the first houses of Gordon Van Tyne. Let's go ahead now. Now this is Christopher's house before the porch was remodeled. Let's go to the next one now. And that's the way it looks now. And that's pretty much the way it looked when it was built. It might be a model 1201B 1932 Winona. Okay, we're ready for the next one. And that is, does anybody remember Catherine Ash, the teacher? She and Argyle bought 2 lots, and it was on the south side of town at the time. It was city limits. And the realtor told her, you should buy the vacant lot next to it. And she didn't want to, but he talked her into it. So she owned both the lots. And she saw the car come in, and she saw the house being built. She told me this in her back room on the left side in the back of the house. But lock that in your mind, because later on I'm going to tell you the way to identify the houses, and I call it the look. You've got a big chimney, and it's tapered. You've got that swoosh in the front. A lot of them had these aluminum awnings, and it's a balanced building. The window on the left balances the one on the right, and a lot of kid homes have that. I guess you call that symmetry. The next one is the Herschel Henry house, and now Mr. Darda lives in it. That's at 213 North Riverside, and we think that's an Avalon 3048. Don showed me a piece of wood that he recovered from the sighting that had a sticker on the back that indicated that it came from Chicago. Didn't say Sears, but that's the way they identified their pieces of wood. They would put stickers on them. Remember Frank Kuschel? Well, you're not alone. He may have had as much impact on the American housing as his famous contemporary, Frank Lloyd Wright. Kuschel was not an architect. He was a merchandising genius, credited with inventing Sears Roebuck and Company's Modern Homes program, which provided well-designed, well-constructed, economical shelter for perhaps 75,000 American families between 1908 and 1940. He was managing the China department in 1906 when he was giving the dismal task of overseeing the dismantling of their building materials department. That's all they had. They had a catalog and they sold lumber. Sales were down and there was too much inventory sitting in expensive warehouses, and it seemed time to unload the lots. So he was convinced that these building supplies could be sold at a profit, and if they were distributed rationally and if there was a little incentive for buying them. So instead of abandoning the sale of millwork and other building parts, why not charge the way these goods were sold? What if customers could pick a plan for their dream house from a Sears catalog? And then, instead of selling building materials only in random bits and pieces, Sears could market them in a coordinated package, one containing exactly what was needed to build a particular house, and shipped in 2 boxcars directly to the railroad station from the directly to the railroad station nearest the building site. Generally, it was economically better to locate the house within a few miles of the railroad station, so you can usually find them a short distance from a railroad siding. In some cases, homes were delivered from the railroad siding on flatbed trucks or horse and wagon. If you go over to Francisville and Madeiraville, you can see a string of these kid houses, and then you can look over there and you can see the old Monon. And there's a siding right there. That's how they got there. Sears' big general merchandise catalogs were already selling everything needed to furnish a house, from beds to toilets, sinks, and kitchen ranges. The sales of these items would increase too. They'd put it all in one package. But Sears wasn't the only or first company to sell houses by catalog. 2 years before that, North American Construction Company of Bay City, Michigan had begun selling pre-cut buildings. They sold houses, small cottages, garages, and boathouses out of mail order plain book. In 1895 to 1900, Sears sold building supplies, and that was it. So that was 2 years before the first Sears catalog was issued, and that was in 1908. The same year, 1911, a lot of dates and numbers, just don't pay a lot of attention to that. Sears began to finance them, and the nation was experiencing a booming population. Many of these were recent European immigrants who were ignored by the conservative banking community. To get a mortgage, it was quite an operation. And with Sears, all you had to answer is one question: do you have a job? And if you did, you got the mortgage. What do you think about that, Steve? The true ready-cut house package was first offered in 1914, including plans, specifications, and detailed assembly instructions, along with pre-cut and factory-fitted lumber and all other building materials except for masonry. The reason they didn't supply the masonry is it was heavy and it was costly to transport. You could usually get that from your local lumber yard. The lumber was stamped with a Sears name and numbered on the ends of the boards. Although many Sears houses have Sears names or numbers stamped on the lumber, some don't have the numbers or any stamping, and that makes it kind of hard to identify them. Sears estimated that using their pre-cut and fitted lumber could save 40% on labor costs. Sears prided itself on offering floor plans that were both efficient and attractive, maximizing the usability of very limited space. The smaller houses sometimes combined living and dining rooms, while the smallest made do with a built-in eating nook or a kitchen table. So they made 2 rooms into one. Most of the houses had 2 or 3 bedrooms, although some had 4 or even 5. The majority only had 1 bathroom, and some, especially in the early 20th century, had none, because many rural and suburban areas lacked piped-in water and septic fields for their sewage. By the 1930s, quite a few of the larger houses had 2 and even 2.5 bathrooms. The Sears house was often equipped with the most sought-after conveniences of its time, from built-in china cabinets, mirrored closet doors. You see that mirror there? It's the door. The door is open. There's the door, and it's opening into a room. But that was one of their options. Dining nooks, kitchen cupboards, telephone niches. You can imagine somebody picking up a candlestick phone and making a call to Lizzie and putting it back there in that nook. Although Sears houses consistently display certain construction detail, like 5-piece eaves, brackets, front porches, and I didn't realize that front porches were an aspect of a kid home, but possibly some older houses didn't have front porches, and they had small attic windows. So do other well-designed, ready-cut, and conventional houses of the period. The mortgage program peaked in the late 1920s and increasingly felt the strain during the Great Depression. Sears withdrew from their mortgage loan department in 1934 after liquidating $11 million of mortgage losses. Sears didn't want to know it was a big bad corporation that took everybody's homes, so they absorbed the losses. You figure $11 million back then, what would that be worth now? The Modern Home Program was finally defeated by tens of millions of dollars in mortgage defaults during the Depression, as well as pre-World War II shortages of building materials. Also, another reason for their decline was updated building codes, which made selling the kit homes more difficult. Each state or town or community would have a different code, and they weren't quite set up to meet all those codes, so that's why the prefab houses and stick-built houses kind of took over. So now we're going to go into how do you identify one, or how do you know you have a Sears house. And a lady by the name of Rosemary Thornton, and she has a website at searshomes.org, has been researching and writing about Sears Roebuck kit houses for years and considered the foremost authority on them. She's published several books, including The Houses That Sears Built. I contacted her, and she said she'd be glad to make a trip from her home and come up and make a presentation to the Historical Society if that would be something you would like. But she's nationally acclaimed. So the following can help confirm your Sears house. First, you check the construction date. Sears sold kit homes only between 1908 and 1940. Look for stamped lumber in the attic or basement. Alpha and numerical codes can be found on the butt end and the face of the framing timbers. Well, you're not going to see the butt end, but you'll see the flat part of the joists and that sort of thing. You'll see the numbers on them. If you can't access the attics or basements, you might be able to see marked lumber by opening up the bathtub's plumbing access door. Little door about this big down by the tub, up by the faucets. So you open that up and go in there with a flashlight, and you should be able to see some numbers. Aladdin used words. Gordon Van Tyne and Montgomery Ward used numbers separated by a hyphen. And that's the way some of the lumber is marked. The letters are about this high. Next one. And this one, do you want to show that one? This one came from a house in Winnemac that was demolished. That's all I got out of the house. But if you look on it, it's got a number, and it was written in grease pencil. Can you imagine a guy writing a number on 3,000 pieces so he could ship a house? Look for shipping labels on the back of baseboards, moldings, door and window trim, and basement staircases, or look for paperwork tucked away in the house. Look under a staircase. So you may have stairs going down to the basement. You can go down there and look at the stairs and see numbers on them. And not all Sears houses had basements. Most of them didn't. On the shipping label, you might see an address such as 925 Homan Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Also look for stamps or marks showing that the millwork was shipped from Norwood Sash and Door in Ohio, which supplied Sears windows and doors. Sears ended up buying them. That's the way they worked. Check the floor plan. Here's a floor plan right here. And the room size using a reliable field guide or a catalog. And it's difficult to verify the manufacturer of a home without measuring the rooms right to the inch, because competitors would copy the designs and make the rooms a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. and that would be to protect them probably from a liability. So if you measure within an inch and so forth, that's another way to identify it. The home's footprint should be a perfect match to the Sears home. Reversed floor plans were an option, so the home may be a mirror image of the floor plan shown in the field guide. Does anybody remember the Goodman House north of town? Just right at 200 North. 200 North turns. Well, that was flipped. The catalog shows it with the door on the right. Well, they asked them to change it so the door was on the left. Now we'll go to a couple catalogs. Let's back up just one. One more there. This is the way your catalogs were. There'd be 75 or 80 pages with different designs and patterns. Conduct a deed search. A Sears mortgage may be listed on the deed. Check the hardware. Sears logo may be on the doorknobs and hinges and miscellaneous hardware. Well, this is a door plate, and I understand that particular plate was only used in their kid homes. So that's another way to identify them. Now, next one is a hinge. You see that hinge looks a little bit flimsy, but that's a kit home hinge. Now, the next one, let's go to the next one. Oh, it's gone. Okay, just leave it right there. Back up one to the doorknob. Isn't that fancy? It comes clear down to here, and look at that. It looks like Art Nouveau. That's beautiful. That's out of Christopher's house. So we're pretty sure that that's a kid house. Now, if you look at this house, you see those concrete blocks? Well, I mentioned earlier that they didn't ship masonry products, so they shipped a mold so people could make their own concrete blocks and save money. So if you see that on the house, that's another indication. Check the bathtub. Sears kit homes often had a small SR, Sears Roebuck, cast into the lower corner of the tub. And on the underside of the kitchen sinks near the front. And then they use a good wall sheet plaster, or we use drywall. They had 4-foot square pieces of this good wall, and they had their name on the back of that. Make a note of the characteristic column arrangements on the front porch. About 24 of Sears' most popular designs had unique column designs. You see right there, that's got at least 2 columns, maybe 3. And note that they're tapered. That takes a lot of knowledge and ability to do that. But with their machines, they could just run them out like McDonald's does hamburgers. Next one. There's another multiple column sitting on a tapered column of brick. So you've got brick and wood together. Next one. Let's go one more. Oh, that isn't it. Okay, back up a second. Next one. You see the top of that door? That's a nice touch, but that's the way their houses were finished. Do you see that? Another sign, it's a Sears house. Okay, see the newel post? They had several different types of newel posts that you could place in your house. And one thing that I found is a lot of their stairways would come down and then turn at the bottom. There'd be 2 or 3 steps at the bottom. Okay, there's just a piece of trim that's along a stairway right by the baseboard, and it's called stairwell side trim. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now you see that chimney. Does anybody see anything funny about that? There's two sources for that chimney, and that wouldn't make the code now. You have to have one chimney for one flue. But that's another way to identify them. That's the way they were done before we had building codes. Next one. They had insulation in the ceiling. That's pretty common now. One thing, back up a minute. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet, but center to center on the sills and the upright, the studs and so forth, were 14 3/8 inches instead of a 16 or 18 inch distance. So if they're closer together, you got a better house. More material. Okay, now let's go to the next one. This one is really hard to see. I tried to get it better, but if you bear with me, this is a block, and this is a stairway coming down to it. And then there's, right here, is a piece of baseboard. You put a block in there, and almost anybody can cut that joint. But that's another sign. This is a stair rail. It's kind of zigzaggy, but that's the way they looked. Sears houses were often sold in groups. Often if you see a Sears house, you will also find additional Sears houses in the neighborhood. For example, the Ash House at the south end of town has 2 or 3 within a block. There's one behind it, there's one across the street from it, and go farther south or north, Charlie Byfield's house. Anybody remember his house? They're all within about a block. And I guess what would happen is a homeowner would see a Sears house go up and think, I ought to have one. So boom, they put one in here and somebody else sees one, and you got a little cluster going. Now here, I suppose everybody's seen these houses. There's 3 houses here, and there's 2 houses on Riverside. Those are all built, I believe, by the Russell brothers. And what's next door to the house that's next to this one, but Don Darda's house. There you got a group of 6 houses on the same block. Now, research can be conducted on Sears Archives Modern Homes website. It's www.modernhomes.com, where users are invited to register their Sears house. So, Don, that's something I figured you'd want to do that. All 447 designs are listed along with the years they were produced. And then there's also text pages. And I've got a little check sheet up here for anybody that wants the websites and some of the identification methods. It's right on the end of this table up here. So there's one other one, SearsArchives.com, and they list homes by the date. So that's it for now. Questions or comments?
What did they use for shingles?
They had asphalt shingles and they shipped them. Believe it or not, they're heavy. They could have bought them at a lumber yard, but the asphalt shingles came with the house. I've got a series of catalogs up here. You're welcome to come up and look at them. I've got some houses in town that I've marked possible, and you can thumb through here and see the ones that have the look. And I'm going to make a sheet like I've got here and check off the things that identify it, and somehow we will start to build a file on them. And one thing I thought would be really nice for the club is to, you could make a fundraiser out of this by making a tour of the town kid homes. Get a school bus, charge everybody $10 and go around and show them, and then show National Historic houses like Mr. Simmermaker's up here, and the Hip and Steel House over here, and others. The president of the bank, Horner. The Horner House down there, I think that's a Gordon Van Tyne. If you look at it, it's got little limestone blocks in between the bricks. They've got a little arrow on them, and that's one of Gordon Van Tyne's signs. Now, Ralph came to my house one time and told me that a mason came down on a train every day to build his house. So Ralph didn't cut corners on it. He got him a nice house. But when you go by it real slowly. On the east side, the north side, and I think the south side, there's little blocks about this big. And that's an indication, so I'm going to target them too. Any other questions?
Fred?
Yes.
This is just a comment, and it's not about houses. But the Memorial Swinging Bridge, which turned 100 this year, was a kit bridge that came from the Chicago South Works on the railroad track.
The South Works of U.S. Steel?
Yes.
You are kidding. Well, my dad hauled the bridge for the Denham cottages. There was a bridge across there. I don't know if it's there anymore or not, but it is. Well, he hauled it down, and he hauled for Herbie Ho. He had a place over here. He'd haul harnesses, and he'd haul truckloads of harnesses for the Gumses and Garys. I mean, boy, wasn't that exciting?
Fred, in appreciation for doing this, Christopher said you weren't really going to show up if you didn't get a coconut cream pie.
Oh,
We acquired a coconut cream pie case.
well,
I think that's
I think we
they want the dish back.
I think we should have a Dwayne. I think we should have a fundraiser here. Dwayne, would you auction this off?
Are you serious?
I'm serious. I'm watching my sugar. So, who wants to start with a bid of $10? There's $10. We got you started. No, you're the man.
Oh, Fred.
Yeah. Get it up to about 100.
About 100?
100.
Well, doesn't surprise me with Fred Zahrt up here.
Anyway, all right, 10, 15. Who's the 15 down upon 10 over here to 15? 15, now 20, 20, now 5. Who's the 20, 25, 25, 25, 25, and 30. Take it 30, 30, 30, when you get 30, 30, 30, down 5, 35, 35, 5.
There's one over there.
You want to get 35, 35. I got $30 now, pound for 35, 35, for 35, anybody? $30 million over here, no pound, 35, a bit 35.
Come on.
Everybody?
Come on, open it up. Open it up.
Let's go, folks. Break loose. 35, 35, and now 40. I got 35, 40, 40, 40, 40, 40. I got 35, and then 40, 40, 40. Now 5, 45 will be your partner. I got 45, and then 50, 45, and then 50. I got 45, and then 50. And now 5. And now 5, 50 over here, to 5, 55, 55.
We're going to 100.
I got 55, 55, 50 over here, to 5, 55, and then 55.
75.
Anybody, 55?
There's 75 right there.
75. $80. $80. 80.
He just builds.
75 and 80, 75 and 80. I get 75, 80.
There's a bid right there. Right there's a bid. See that?
Right there, 80.
80.
80.
Come on. Come on.
I get 75 and 80, 80, 75 and 80,
Right there.
One more time, $80, or 80, what 80 will be partners. I get 75 and 80.
There's 80.
Maybe deal will be 80, not 5. You bring 85 with 80, 85, 85, 80.
John?
85. I got $80 now, 5, 85, 85, 85. Anybody? Are you sure you don't want to do it?
Yeah, I can't.
You're saying yes when you're shaking your head, right?
He just said 100.
85, 85. 80 here, down, pine, good, 85, 85. Anybody?
He said 100.
He
you
did
hear
say
it?
100,
Did you
didn't
see?
he? I thought I heard that. 100, now 5. This 100, now 5, put a little pound over here, to 5 over here, to 100 here, to 5. Anybody? 105. Right over here, $100. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Now, anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. Can I borrow $100?
I don't have that on me. Somebody's got some questions somewhere. Yeah.
Is that done locally too?
Say that again.
Plaster on the interior?
The plaster came with the believe it or not, yeah, that's a kind of a standard thing, but the plaster came. And I'm sure that if you said you didn't want the plaster, they'd just take it off. Did I tell you that one company, 24 hours from receiving an order, could have 2 rail cars loaded, ready to go? 24 hours, 2 railroad cars loaded. And they shipped them all over. Yeah.
The houses, there's one up on Northwest Street, back this way and across the street from Smitty's. And then
Yeah.
has that business.
It's got the swoop. I'm sure they are. They might be Aladdin. Aladdin made those. Mm-hmm. And then there's, what's her name, Carol Chapman? I don't know what her married name is. Well, I think her house is one. She did a little research, and that's on the list of things. Any other questions? Yes.
Any companies like nowadays copy blueprints? Do they offer to build things just like this, like they used to nowadays?
I would think that if you had a copyright on it, it would have expired by now. So I would say you probably could. But you would be it'd be tough to get the quality. One company advertised $1 for any knot that you found in the wood. And the funny thing is, the wood that they used didn't have knots in it. So they never had to pay. So, I mean, there's another thing about the quality. Don.
Can you explain the location of the last house you were talking about? The guy who hired the mason that had the smaller block?
Oh, Ralph Horner. He was the president of the bank here.
Where's that house located?
Oh, it's down here at Market in Washington. Is that Tim Powers?
Thank you.
I'm sure that is. I'm sure it is. Because Ralph had to, yes.
Who any of the local contractors were who actually then built them?
I do not. A lot of them were built by the owners themselves. And I'm sure they had combinations where they'd bring one guy in to maybe pour the foundation. But with their instructions, 75 pages of instructions, it went just piece by piece by piece. And, Yes.
Well, Peter had some pictures of her grandfather's Sears home that was built on 550 in Star City.
It was built in
1911.
Oh, that's the one that's right. It's right near the railroad.
No, it's out in the country.
Oh, really? Well,
Down past my house.
Yeah,
I want to take a picture of that.
sure.
So,
That's Bishop.
there's Don Fritz lives in a Sears house, and then 550. You go on farther. There's a Sears house up on a hill, a big white house, 2-story. So I mean, they're just all over the place. Yeah.
This one down here, near where Marathon is, and then the first town south, there's the parking lot where, the county, I think, owns.
Oh, where Herb Lathrop lived?
Lathrop, okay.
Is that a kid house?
That's what I wondered. It sure seems like it. My uncle lived there for a while, but it just kind of seems like it.
It doesn't have any of the items I've selected here, but if it is a kid house, it could be a different manufacturer. I really don't know. But south, where Gurrell's house is, Gurrell, I think that's a kid house. And across the street, where the guy that owned the theater, Bill Doty, that real nice brick house.
Is that a kid house?
You look at it, and it's got the little white limestone inserts in it.
Wild house.
It doesn't have the arrows, but it's got the little thing, so it's suspect. I've got a picture of it here, I think, as a possible.
Milton always said there was an exact replica of his house. He took me by it one time in Monticello.
Oh, really?
Just exactly like his house.
There's 2 houses over here on, the next street over. Yeah, Franklin, I think it is. The 2 houses that are identical, they're side by side. They don't fit the categories here, but I think those could be. And then Dan Murphy's house, I think that's a Gordon Van Dyne. It's a beautiful home, and it's got a lot of the indications. Yes, I'm sorry.
Do these kit houses, do they have what they call pocket doors?
You could get them.
Some of them have pocket doors to them.
I'm sure you could get them. Now, in the back of these catalogs are a bunch of options. You could buy columns that go in the house. You could buy a bookcase with leaded glass windows on it. But you're welcome to look at this stuff. It's unbelievable the stuff they had. Yes.
With these houses, when they come through, the normal size, because you drive around Winnemac and you see a lot of homes that their windows is like 2 foot. Then when did they go to the big window? All you gotta do is drive around, you'll see these old houses that was built.
I can't answer that.
Yep. I just noticed down over at the end of the viaduct.
I was by your house yesterday.
The windows, you can just tell they're just small.
Well, you look at your
They're not the wide windows.
You look at your house and you see there's a balance in it.
They're this wide here instead of this wide.
Right. I don't know what the reason would have been. Yes, sir.
Here's good old,
That's where Remax is.
you can be the architect.
It's at the stoplight.
At Washington Street and
Now, if you look at this house, you see those art glass windows? They're there, around the corner. I mentioned square blocks in the front of the house. You see there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, and around on the side as well. And there's some other indications like the tops of the doors, they all match. I was in the house a couple years ago and I didn't have enough information to really pin it down, but it's suspect. And the house next to it, that is a gorgeous house. I think Tony Kane built that. And that's definitely a kit house of some sort. It's got the art glass windows. It's got the look. So if anybody wants to get involved with remodeling one, I bet that one could be bought. That'd be a lot of fun. Yes, Karen.
I'm assuming these kit houses were designed to match the popular building styles of the day.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that also helps complicate identifying
Yes.
kit houses from the kit houses.
Yes. Now on 39, as you go down to Rose Acres, there's one of those lookalikes across on the west side. I went to this house and the lady told me her dad cut the lumber and shipped it to Kentucky and had it run through a sawmill and back and build it. But see, he could have had the plans and build it with the plans, because you could buy the plans. So I mean, that one shot me down, but it was a dead ringer for a Sears house. But it's a lot of fun to look at these. Yes,
There's
Judy.
on Range Road outside of Monon. There's my aunt lived on that road, and right down from her, there's a railroad track. And
Yeah.
right here is a kit house. I mean,
I've looked for that house.
didn't find it. Still there.
I thought it was off of 421.
No, it's Range Road.
Well, what's Range Road?
It's where my aunt lived.
I'll get a hold of her. You told me about that, and I drove around a little bit, and there's a couple Gordon Bend.
Range Road goes into Monon. It comes out by Hannah-Kratz. You know where Hannah-Kratz is? Yeah. It's a grain mill.
If you go south on 421, on either side of the road are houses, brick houses, red brick houses with that little arrow, and so every time I go by, I give it the eye. Any other questions? A dumb question is fine. Welcome them. Yes.
What happened that caused this type of procuring a house to fall out of favor? Was it something with like materials, or what changed and what did that cause us to be able to come in the past?
Well, I think the biggest thing was building codes, and I think the unions probably had something to do with it. They were trained, I don't know how many years they went through training, but they were trained to learn the codes, and the codes became ingrained everywhere, and Sears just couldn't compete with that. When these houses first came on was the end of World War II. That's why we had the desire for housing, and that was one of the reasons that they flourished. I'll be available here if anybody wants to look at some of this stuff. This little sheet has those websites clear at the bottom, and you might be surprised at what you find. Any more questions? Yes.
Fred, in your research of the porches on these homes, how many had a concrete floor versus a floor made of lumber?
Most of the houses didn't have a big porch like your house, like Mrs. Ash. It's just a couple steps and that was it. That was kind of an entrance, and it had a little awning over it. I really can't tell you. I don't know any specifics on that. That's a good question. I'm sure it could be Googled and somebody could find out. I don't want to keep you here anymore. Last chance. Okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to come here. Thank you. And thanks to Christopher, who's our IT man.